Don't bother showing up. You'll ruin the memories. My brother messaged 2 days before the ceremony. Dad just liked the message. I took a deep breath, canceled the videographer I paid for, and transferred the honeymoon fund back to my account. They had no idea what was about to happen. I, 32M, never thought my own family would turn their backs on me when I needed them most. Growing up, we weren't the perfect family, but I always believed we had each other's backs. My brother was 5 years older, and despite our age gap, we were close as kids. Dad worked long hours at the factory, and Mom held everything together until cancer took her when I was 15. After that, it was just the three of us figuring things out. My brother got married young, had 2 kids, and settled into suburban life. I took a different path, focusing on my career in software development. The money was good, and I'd built up a decent savings account over the years. When my brother announced his wedding renewal ceremony for their 10th anniversary, I was genuinely happy for them. They'd been through some rough patches, and this felt like a fresh start. The planning began 6 months ago. My brother mentioned they wanted something special, something their kids could remember. The original wedding had been a courthouse affair with just immediate family, so this was their chance to do it right. When he started talking about costs, I could see the stress in his eyes. 2 kids, a mortgage, and his wife's part-time job weren't leaving much room for dream weddings. That's when I offered to help. I told him I'd cover the videographer and contribute to their honeymoon fund. It wasn't about showing off or buying their love. I genuinely wanted to see them happy. The videographer alone cost $3,000, and I'd put another $5,000 toward their planned trip to Hawaii. It felt good to be able to help my family with something that mattered to them. The weeks leading up to the ceremony were busy but exciting. I helped with small details, picked up decorations, and even drove 2 hours to collect the custom cake they'd ordered. My brother's wife seemed grateful, and my brother kept thanking me for everything I was doing. Dad, who'd been distant since Mom died, even seemed to be coming around, asking about my work and actually listening to my answers. 2 weeks before the ceremony, things started feeling different. Family group chats became quieter when I was online. When I'd suggest meeting for coffee or offer to help with last-minute preparations, responses were short and delayed. I figured everyone was just stressed about the big day approaching. Then came the message that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was reviewing some code when my phone buzzed. My brother had sent me a text that made my stomach drop. He told me not to bother showing up to the ceremony. He said I'd just ruin the memories they were trying to create. He didn't explain why, didn't give me a chance to understand what I'd done wrong. Just that cold, brutal message telling me I wasn't welcome at the event I'd helped plan and pay for. I stared at my phone, reading the message over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood. But the words were clear. 20 minutes later, I saw that Dad had liked the message, not responded with confusion or concern for his younger son being excluded from a family event. He'd liked it. That simple thumbs up felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I called my brother immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried Dad next, same thing. I sent messages asking what was happening, what I'd done, begging for some explanation. Hours passed with no response. The silence was deafening. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying every interaction from the past few weeks, searching for clues about what had gone wrong. Had I said something offensive? Done something to upset them? I couldn't think of anything, but clearly, something had happened to turn them against me so completely. The next day brought no answers, just more silence. I drove to my brother's house, but no one answered the door even though I could see cars in the driveway. I went to Dad's apartment, and he wouldn't even look at me through the window. It was like I'd become invisible, or worse, like I was something they needed to avoid. That evening, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by the silence of my phone not ringing, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and painful, but underneath it, a cold anger was building. They wanted to cut me out without explanation? Fine. But they'd made one crucial mistake. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. First, I canceled the videographer. When he asked why, I explained that there had been a family emergency and the event was being postponed indefinitely. He was understanding, especially when I told him to keep the deposit for his trouble. The real payment, the remaining $2,500, stayed in my account. Next, I logged into my bank account and initiated a transfer. The $5,000 I'd put into their honeymoon fund came back to my checking account. It felt strange, watching those numbers change, taking back money I'd given freely just days before. But I wasn't done. Not even close. The next morning, I started making calls. The florist who was providing the ceremony arrangements had been paid through my credit card as a favor to my brother. I called and explained there had been a family emergency, and we needed to cancel. She was sympathetic and agreed to refund the payment, minus a small cancellation fee. Another $1,500 back in my pocket. The photographer was next. I'd recommended him to my brother and had agreed to split the cost. When I called to withdraw my portion of the payment, he mentioned that my brother hadn't paid his half yet. Without my contribution, they wouldn't be able to afford his services. I felt a twinge of something, not quite guilt, but close to it. Then I remembered Dad liking that message, and the feeling passed. I'd also paid for the vintage car rental my brother wanted for photos. The classic Mustang convertible that was supposed to make him feel like a movie star for the day. Gone. The deposit on the upgraded sound system for the ceremony? Cancelled. The contribution toward the open bar at the reception? Withdrawn. Each phone call felt like pulling out a thread, and I watched their perfect day unravel with each cancellation. But the most satisfying call was to the resort in Hawaii where they'd planned to spend their honeymoon. I'd booked and paid for the entire week as a surprise gift. The resort was understanding about the cancellation, especially when I explained it was a family emergency. They refunded everything except a small processing fee. By Thursday evening, I'd systematically removed myself and my financial contributions from every aspect of their celebration. But I wasn't finished yet. I knew my brother's co-workers, some of whom had become friends over the years. I also knew his neighbors and several family friends who were planning to attend. I crafted a carefully worded message explaining that due to unexpected family circumstances, I wouldn't be able to attend the ceremony after all. I mentioned that I'd hoped to celebrate this milestone with them, but sometimes family dynamics make that impossible. I kept it vague, but emotional enough that people would remember it. Then I did something that felt both petty and justified. I started reaching out to extended family members, cousins and aunts and uncles who'd been planning to attend. I didn't badmouth my brother or father directly. Instead, I shared how hurt I was to be excluded from such an important family event without explanation. I mentioned how I'd been looking forward to celebrating with everyone and how confused I was about being told not to come. The responses were immediate and concerned. Family members started asking questions. They wanted to know why I wasn't coming, what had happened, why there was suddenly drama around what was supposed to be a happy celebration. Some of them reached out to my brother and father directly, demanding explanations. By Friday, my phone was buzzing constantly with family members taking sides. Some supported me, outraged that I'd been excluded without explanation. Others remained neutral, trying to play peacemaker. But the damage was done. The family unity that was supposed to surround this celebration had cracked wide open. I spent Friday evening doing one final thing. I wrote a letter, not to my brother or father, but to my future self. I detailed everything that had happened, every feeling I'd experienced, every action I'd taken. I wanted to remember this moment, this decision to stand up for myself instead of just accepting their treatment. I sealed it in an envelope and put it in my desk drawer. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzly. I woke up knowing that somewhere across town, my brother was probably discovering the full extent of what my absence meant. No videographer to capture the moment. No photographer they could afford. No upgraded sound system. No vintage car for photos. No honeymoon waiting for them afterward. My phone had been silent since Thursday evening. No attempts to reach out. No efforts to explain or reconcile. Just silence. It confirmed what I'd suspected. They didn't want me there, period. Whatever I'd done or whoever had poisoned them against me, they were committed to shutting me out. Around noon, my phone finally rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, it was my brother's wife. Her voice was strained, almost panicked. She asked if there was any way to undo the cancellations, if I could help them salvage some of what they'd lost. She explained that they were scrambling to find alternatives, but everything was either booked or too expensive. I listened to her plead for several minutes before I responded. I told her that I'd been told not to come, that I'd ruin their memories just by being there. If my presence was so toxic, then surely my contributions would be equally unwelcome. She tried to explain, started to say something about a misunderstanding, but I cut her off. I told her that misunderstandings could be cleared up with communication, and I'd received nothing but silence for 3 days. She hung up without another word. An hour later, my brother called. His voice was different, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. He asked what it would take to fix things, to get the vendors back, to salvage their day. I told him the same thing I'd told his wife. He'd made it clear I wasn't welcome, that I'd ruin their memories. I was simply respecting his wishes by removing myself completely from their celebration. He started to explain then, finally. Apparently, Dad had been filling his head with stories about me. Dad had convinced him that I was trying to take over their special day, that I was showing off with my money and making them look bad. Dad had suggested that I was only helping so I could hold it over them later, so I could always remind them of what they owed me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dad's paranoia about what I might do in the future had created the exact situation he'd feared. By trying to protect my brother from being in my debt, he'd ensured that my brother ended up owing me an apology he'd never be able to fully pay. I told my brother that if Dad's opinion mattered more than our relationship, then he'd made the right choice. I wished him well and hung up. Update 1. The ceremony happened, but it wasn't what they'd planned. Through mutual friends, I heard bits and pieces of how the day went. They'd managed to find a last-minute photographer, but he was clearly amateur level. The sound system was the venue's basic setup, which apparently cut out twice during the vows. They'd borrowed a friend's sedan instead of the vintage car, and the florist they'd hastily hired delivered arrangements that didn't match their color scheme. But the biggest issue was the family drama that overshadowed everything. Several relatives didn't attend in solidarity with me, and those who did come spent the reception asking questions about why I wasn't there. My brother and his wife spent their special day explaining and re-explaining the situation instead of celebrating. Dad apparently gave a speech during the reception about family loyalty and sticking together through thick and thin. According to my cousin, the irony was lost on no one in attendance. Update 2. 3 weeks after the ceremony, I received an unexpected visitor. Dad showed up at my apartment on a Thursday evening, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. He didn't apologize immediately, but he did ask if we could talk. He explained his reasoning, finally. After Mom died, he'd struggled with feeling useless, like he couldn't provide for his remaining family the way he wanted to. When he saw me stepping in to pay for expensive things for my brother, it triggered something in him. He felt like I was highlighting his failures as a father, showing everyone that he couldn't take care of his own son's important moments. His fear had turned into resentment, and he'd convinced himself that I was being manipulative, that I was trying to buy love or create obligations. He'd worked on my brother for weeks, planting seeds of doubt about my motivations until my brother felt conflicted about accepting my help. I listened to his explanation, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than anger. I felt sad. Sad that he'd tortured himself with these thoughts. Sad that his own insecurities had destroyed what was left of our family. Sad that Mom wasn't there to knock sense into all of us. But understanding his motivation didn't undo the damage. I told him that I appreciated his honesty, but that trust, once broken, wasn't easily repaired. He'd chosen to believe the worst about me without ever asking for my side. He'd encouraged my brother to exclude me from a family event based on assumptions and fears rather than facts. He left that evening without the reconciliation he'd hoped for, but with a promise that I'd think about what he'd said. Update 3. 2 months after the ceremony, my brother reached out again. This time, he wanted to meet in person, just the two of us. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our places, neutral territory for a conversation that needed to happen. He looked exhausted, older somehow. He apologized properly this time, not just for the message or for excluding me, but for believing Dad's paranoid theories without talking to me first. He admitted that Dad's words had played on his own insecurities about accepting so much financial help from his younger brother. He explained that the aftermath of the ceremony had been brutal. His wife was furious about how the day had turned out. Several family members were still not speaking to him, and he'd realized too late that he'd destroyed the most important relationship in his life for no good reason. I accepted his apology, but I also made something clear. The money didn't matter to me. What mattered was that when it came down to it, he'd chosen to believe I was capable of manipulation and selfishness rather than love and generosity. That hurt in a way that couldn't be easily fixed. We're talking now, slowly rebuilding something that might eventually resemble trust again. But it's different. I'm different. I learned that I'm capable of ruthless revenge when I'm pushed too far, and that knowledge changes how I see myself. The money I reclaimed from their wedding went into a separate savings account. I haven't touched it, and I'm not sure I ever will. It sits there as a reminder of the day I chose to protect myself instead of just absorbing their treatment and hoping for the best. Dad and I have had a few more conversations, but we're nowhere near resolved. He's struggling with the consequences of his actions, and I'm struggling with forgiveness. Some bridges, once burned, leave scars that never fully heal. The family dynamic has permanently shifted. Extended relatives now know that our little unit isn't as solid as it appeared. Trust has been broken in multiple directions, and everyone is walking on eggshells, trying to figure out the new normal. Was my revenge justified? I go back and forth on that question. Part of me feels vindicated, satisfied that they experienced consequences for their actions. Part of me wonders if I went too far, if I should have been the bigger person and just absorbed the hurt without striking back. But mostly, I'm glad I stood up for myself. For too long, I'd been the family member who just went along with things, who absorbed tension and tried to keep peace at my own expense. That version of myself would have spent years wondering what he'd done wrong, replaying every interaction, and probably would have eventually convinced himself that he deserved the treatment. The person I became that week? He refused to be disposable. He demanded respect, even if it meant burning everything down to get it. I'm still figuring out if I like this version of myself better, but I definitely respect him more. They learned that excluding someone from their family doesn't just remove that person's presence. It also removes everything that person brings to the table. Every contribution, every gesture of love, every piece of support. You can't have the relationship without the person, and you can't have the benefits without the relationship. Sometimes the cost of taking someone for granted is losing them entirely. Sometimes the price of believing the worst about someone is having them prove they're capable of it after all.